Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Okay, devotees, Hare Krishna, we're just testing. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Krishna Padaya Srimad Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namo Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Prachani Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastityadesh. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Shivas Gauravanda Krishna Krishna Hare Krishna Krishna Rama Rama Hare Krishna Rama Rama Hare Hare Rama 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 Hare Rama Rama Hare Krishna 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 Rama Rama. 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 Hare Krishna, devotees, you're there.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, Dandavat Pranams.
Dandavat Pranam.
Welcome.
Hare Krishna. Yes, okay. I was given some different information.
The Tony Robbins My Applause app. It's the Tony Robbins experience.
What's that? Yeah, I was given some wrong information, unfortunately, so I was waiting on another Zoom, waiting, but nothing was happening. So, okay, so here we are. And I guess we can begin.
My apologies, Maharaj. It was my mistake. I did not see beforehand. Sorry. Please forgive me.
I was given a different link. So anyway, it's all right. We're here. So here we go.
I would like, Maharaj, if you allow me to just introduce you briefly to the students, although there is not so much of an introduction, need of an introduction, but I'd like to also, on behalf of the Mayapur Institute, to welcome you to the Bhaktivedanta course. I really appreciate that you're taking this time to teach. It's so busy. You told me last time we spoke how busy you were. Couldn't imagine. So we know that this is an effort for you to prepare for the classes, to be with us, and we deeply appreciate it. For the students, as you probably know, Maharaj is, at GBC, is traveling extensively. Well, not now traveling, of course, but he's supervising many areas around the world. And he's a guru in ISKCON, and he's been involved with education for many, many years. And he's been teaching with the Mayapur Institute for the last few years, Bhaktivedanta before. So it's a real pleasure to have him, and I hope that you really value the effort that Maharaj has put into this, to being with you this week. Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. And thank you all for being there. And it's very nice. I'm very happy to be here with you all. So let us begin. I'll begin by reciting some prayers. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Presta Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastyatyades Tarne Sri Krishna Chaitanya Pramanityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchkalpatarubhyas cha kripa sindhubhyeva cha Paditanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Okay, devotees, so we're going into the 9th canto Srimad Bhagavatam. During this week, we're going to cover from chapter 1 through chapter 7. It's an interesting part, of course, of Srimad Bhagavatam, or all of Srimad Bhagavatam's interesting, but it's a kind of, some of it is quite a bit unusual, like this first chapter here that we're going to look at today, and well, maybe we'll go on, we'll just see how it goes. Maybe we'll go on to the second chapter also today, but the first chapter, look at the title, King Sudyumna becomes a woman. Well, what can you say? That's unusual. That's unusual. And the 9th canto is a bit of an unusual canto, actually. I've heard it said, I was trying to find the reference just about an hour ago, but I've heard it said by some, I forget exactly who, but devotee, sort of, somewhat authoritative type of devotee, that sometimes some of our acharyas have called the 9th canto, they've used the term the black canto, means that it's kind of, I don't know, some of it is kind of strange, a bit weird. Anyway, there's no doubt there is some information here in the 9th canto which is somewhat unusual. And this first chapter, King Sudyumna becomes a woman. It's in keeping with that idea. It is unusual. But, having said that, the 9th canto is, the 9th canto, of course, is leading up to the 10th canto. And the 10th canto, of course, is the story of Lord Krishna. And that's just, you could say the most important part of the whole Srimad Bhagavatam, and maybe just the most important part of everything in terms of scripture. And even though it's not just this first chapter, there's a number of places, chapters or parts of the 9th canto which are really unusual, and you might not really expect them. And even you might wonder. I remember the first time I read the Bhagavatam, and I got here to the 9th chapter, and I was reading this, the first chapter of the 9th canto, and the idea entered my mind, what is this doing here? What's this got to do with things? Because it just seems kind of a little bizarre even. But having said that, of course, we're only going to do the first 7 chapters this week, and then you're going to go on with someone else, I'm not sure, but different devotees, and you'll go through the 9th canto, and you'll see that in the parts which are kind of unusual, generally it's pretty clear how there are lessons for us to learn. There are definitely lessons, extremely important lessons for us to learn, like in the story here now in the first chapter. King Sejumana becomes a woman. Well, we'll see as we go through, but basically what happens is that a yajna is performed for someone, for Manu actually, Vaivasvata Manu, to have a very nice son born. But the yajna, there's a mistake made in the yajna. And as a result, instead of a very nice son being born as the child of Manu, who's such an extremely important person. In his previous life, he was Satyavrata, who was very closely connected with Lord Matsya, as you've just been reading, of course, in the 8th canto. So he is just a high-level person in the extreme. But this yajna is performed and a mistake is made. Well, yeah, a mistake is made, let's say. And it comes out that instead of a very nice son being born, a daughter is born. And, not that we're opposed to daughters, but it was just not the idea. It was really not the idea of Manu. And the result of it all, as things sort of, as we'll see as we go through the chapters, as everything unwinds, the whole situation becomes, what would you say? It's sort of a mess, or it's definitely a very unusual situation. So there are lessons to be learned from some of these very extraordinary situations that we're going to read about during this week. Like, how about a bit of human sacrifice? Hare Krishna. Oh my gosh. So yeah, but it's all part, as you'll see as you go through to the end of the 9th canto, it's all part, it's all leading up to the appearance of Lord Krishna, which leads us into the 10th canto, which is just the supermost part of all Shastra, more or less. And even these unusual situations, they're kind of, it sort of falls into place, roughly, in terms of the evolution of the story and bringing us to the point of the appearance of Lord Krishna. Yeah. So that's just a couple of thoughts, just a thought, really, here at the beginning of the 9th canto. Well, I don't know if you do know, actually, but Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, in his very first purport to the first verse of this first chapter of the ninth canto, he makes an interesting point about the structure of the whole ninth canto. He makes the point that the first 13 chapters, they are dealing with the development of the Sun dynasty. And the last 11 chapters are dealing with the development of the Moon dynasty. I think I'm right. Lord Ram appeared in the Sun dynasty, isn't it? As I recall, yeah. I don't know if you were aware of that. Maybe you were aware, or some of you. But it's an interesting point, because here, as the ninth canto develops, then after, not this week, but next week, I guess, is going to be the whole story of Lord Ram. Yeah, who was in the Sun dynasty. And, that's important. That's super important. One little point I could make about that, about the story of Lord Ram as it appears in this ninth canto, is that, what is it now? It's chapters 10 and 11. And then chapter 12, of course, is discussing about Kusha, one of the sons of Lord Ram. And, many years ago, gosh, I forget, it could have been 15 or 20 years ago, I think. I was on the Navadvip Mandal Parikrama, and some devotees from the BBT were there, including the devotee who had been translating Ramayan for the BBT. The BBT was going to publish Ramayan, but then they told us that they gave up the project, and they haven't revived it since then, because the versions of the Ramayan which are available, like your typical Gita press, and there's all sorts of versions of Ramayan, but the devotees told us there was too much conflict between the different versions. There was too much conflict. And so they decided, actually, they discussed it with some, like you could say, Vaishnav scholars, shall we say, some senior devotees from the Gaudiya Math, the older Puri Maharaj, when he was living, and the opinion that came out was, if you want to be really authoritative about Ramayan, then it's too difficult dealing with these different versions. And ultimately, if you really want to be authoritative about Ramayan, just stick with what's there in Srimad Bhagavatam, because at least we know that Srimad Bhagavatam is definitely confirmed by a number of our very great acharyas. Yeah. Anyway, I'm sort of perhaps digressing slightly, although I think it's worthwhile actually to discuss points like this. So yeah, the Sun Dynasty is discussed, kind of the evolution, if you like, or the development of the Sun Dynasty is discussed in the first 13 chapters, and then 11 chapters describe the Moon Dynasty, culminating in the appearance of Lord Krishna. And it all connects. It all connects right from this first chapter in this unusual story of Sudyumna. It all connects right up. I mean, in sort of historical terms, with the appearance of Lord Krishna. It's amazing, actually, and it's really wonderful. So anyway, that's sort of just by way of introduction. And let us dive into the subject matter. Srila Prabhupada, of course, has given an introduction to the chapter, a little sort of in brief analysis, summary of what's discussed. I mean, at least from the historical point of view in the 9th chapter. And of course, you know that the 9th canto, that at the end of the 8th canto, there's the story of Satyavrata, Lord Matsya, and all of that. And so, so Satyavrata, from the end of the 9th canto now into the end of the 8th canto, now into the beginning of the 9th canto, Satyavrata, this very special person who, was directly in the association of the Supreme Lord as Lord Matsya. Now he's Vaivasvata Manu, although he has the name Shraddhadev. He's also known as Shraddhadev. And really, this 9th canto, in one sense, it's an analysis of his dynasty. Yeah, his dynasty, and then a sort of branches. There's a branch. Yeah. Sun Dynasty, then Moon Dynasty, like this. So anyway, okay, I'm just going to briefly, I assume you've got the Bhagavatam there with you, you must have. I'll just touch on the what Prabhupada says in the chapter introduction. So Maharaj Parikshit, as always, he's asking questions, and he asks, okay, can we now talk about this Manu, Vaivasvata, who was formerly Satyavrata, the ruler of Dravida, South India. So he discusses how different descendants come from Vaivasvata Manu or Shraddhadev, that he was the father of Ikshvaku. That, of course, we remember from the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Although, and it's part of what we'll be going through over the next few days, it wasn't like your normal birth. Yeah, some very unusual circumstances surrounding the appearance of Ikshvaku. But yeah, Vaivasvata Manu is there. And then he was sonless before Ikshvaku appeared. And before Ikshvaku appeared, he organized a yajna to get a son. A yajna to satisfy Mitra and Varuna. Sort of unusual personalities, one would think, for a great devotee like him to approach. But anyway, that's what he did. So the yajna was done for a son, but a daughter appeared.
John, I didn't know how you're doing it.
Hare Krishna to you too. I know what happens in these Zoom programs. You know how many Zoom programs I've done in the last year? Gosh, hundreds and hundreds. And every now and then something happens. So yeah, Ela. Anyway, we'll read about that. And of course, Manu was not what he wanted. I mean, not that he was really angry or upset. I mean, actually he felt happy to have a child, but he really wanted a son. So Vashishta, the famous Vashishta Muni, we've all heard of Vashishta Muni. What a famous and prominent transcendental personality, at least we think of him like that, very closely connected with Lord Ram. So Vasishta does some special prayer or some special program, and Ela becomes a very beautiful boy named Sudumna. But it's not that simple. It doesn't finish there. It really doesn't finish there. Complications arise. Some serious complications arise. And the result of those complications is that Sudumna ends up 1 month being male, and 1 month being female. Hare Krishna. Anyway, that's interesting, isn't it? Let us just say it's interesting. Yeah. So, and Sudumna, when Sudumna is first changed back into a woman, then Sudumna gives birth to Pururava, and Pururava features prominently in different places in the rest of the 9th canto, leading up to, and he's very much involved, at least in the early stages of the appearance of Lord Krishna. So anyway, it's a little complicated, but life is sometimes a little complicated. So, okay, so let's go in now to the text. And according to my, it's not just my calculations, but personally I feel that it's suitable, is that in this chapter, there pretty much appear to be 4 pretty clear sections. when we do overviews, I mean, I'm sure you know probably better than me, that when you do overviews, it really helps to break up what you're doing the overview of into different sections so that, so that everything is as coherent as possible. Otherwise, what happens sometimes is, as the stories go from this point to that point, and this happens and something else happens and someone else appears on the scene, as the stories unfold, you can sort of lose the thread of like the real sequence of what's happening. So according to what devotees have told me, and it's my own opinion also, there are 4 sections here. And I don't know if you have things divided up like that in whatever documentation you've got. But let me just tell you what these 4 sections are as far as I'm concerned, and other devotees. First section is from verse 1 to verse 6. And of course, it's always possible to divide things up somewhat differently, but this is, appears reasonable to me. Verse 1 to verse 6. And there, Maharaj Parikshit expresses his desire to hear about the dynasty of Vaivasvata Manu. Vaivasvata Manu is a very important person in our line. Yeah, so he expresses his desire, and let's just put it that way. He sort of questions Shukadev Goswami. Then from verse 7 to verse 22 is discussing the birth of Ila and Ila's transformation into Sudyumna by Vasishta's arrangement. Then from verse 23 to verse 32, it's by the arrangement. Anyway, Lord Shiva enters into the scene, and Sudyumna is transformed back into a female. And then there's some discussion of the history of the place where that happens. It's a particular forest that's called Sukumara. Then the 4th and last section, verse 33 to verse 42, is about Sudyumna regaining his male masculinity, whatever you might say, partially, not completely. Yeah, it's what a situation. Anyway, those are the sections, according to my perception. Do you have things divided up like that yourselves? Could someone nod your head or shake your head or? Yeah, you do. Okay. So that's not news to you then. All right, so let's get into it. Let's go through this first section from verse 1 to verse 6. So Maharaj Parikshit asks that you've told me, I'm just paraphrasing, you've told me about so many Manus. You're all scholars of Srimad Bhagavatam, so you've seen how here and there you get these chapters which are basically lists of descendants of generally of Manus. So you've described so many Manus and their descendants, and during the periods of those manus, the manvantaras of those particular manus, how the Lord has appeared in different forms, performed different pastimes, and this is great. Thank you for that. And then he goes on in like verses 2 and 3. Prabhupada's put 2 and 3 together. So it's it's Maharaj Parikshit again, and he's just saying, you've explained some of the background. You've explained about Manu, Vaivasvata, when he was Satyavrata, and how he got the association of Lord Matsya. Then he became Vaivasvata, the son of Vivasvan, in the following Manvantara. So can you just explain about his descendants? And maybe Maharaj Parikshit, because Maharaj Parikshit, he's also a great Vedic scholar. He's not just some person who is interested to find out some things. Srila Prabhupada makes the point elsewhere in the earlier parts of Srimad Bhagavatam that actually Maharaj Parikshit, he is essentially on the same level spiritually as Shukadev Goswami. And it's just really, you could say, force of circumstances, or you could say the arrangement of the Supreme Lord, that Maharaj Parikshit here in Bhagavatam is in the position of the one asking the questions, and Shukadev is in the position of the one answering the questions. Prabhupada explains that if the circumstances had been different, then it could easily have been around the other way, that Shukadev could have been asking questions and Maharaj Parikshit could have been giving answers, because actually they're equally qualified. They're equally qualified spiritually in Krishna consciousness. So anyway, Maharaj Parikshit is very interested in these things, and we assume, because he knows, anyway, it's my assumption, shall we say my mental speculation, that he knows that this is going to lead up to the appearance of Krishna. Even these unusual things of Sujumina's very unusual story, and the human sacrifice, which we're going to come across shortly, it's all it's all connected, and leading up to the appearance of Lord Krishna. So I wanted to just make a little reference here to an interesting sort of technical point, is that the discussion of the manus, the discussions, plural, of the manus as they appear in the course of Srimad Bhagavatam, this is one of the 10 subjects, the 10 topics of Srimad Bhagavatam as a Mahapurana. Yeah. Now, I'm not up exactly with what you've been taught so far. So I don't know how familiar you are with the idea of Puranas, Mahapuranas, Upa Puranas even, and even Alpa Puranas. We won't get into Upa Puranas and Alpa Puranas at this stage, but Puranas like regular Puranas and Mahapuranas, in terms of our study of Vedic literature and Srila Prabhupada's books, it's really, I would say, essential for a devotee to really develop a mature and well-rounded understanding of Prabhupada's books, to understand what's a Purana and what's a Mahapurana. Has there been discussion of this in your course so far? Not really. Okay. You know, it's there in the Bhagavatam, of course. It's more specifically discussed in Tattva Sandarbha, which I don't know if any of you have read it or taken a seminar on Tattva Sandarbha. It's really extremely interesting. So in Tattva Sandarbha, Srila Jiva Goswami explains how Srimad Bhagavatam is a Mahapurana, whereas there are other Puranas, other of the 18 which are considered Mahapuranas, like, for example, Vishnu Purana is considered Mahapurana. Padma Purana is considered Mahapurana. There's actually only 5 of them which are generally or often considered Mahapuranas, which means they specifically have 10 subjects, whereas a regular Purana has 5 subjects only, 5 of the 10. So in the Bhagavatam, in the second chapter, if you want to make a note, the second canto, chapter 10, verses 1 and 2, if you want to make a note of that, there, the 10 topics of Srimad Bhagavatam as a Mahapurana are listed out by, if I remember correctly, must be by Sutta. And later, I'll look it up and let you know.
I think it's the other way around, actually, Maharaj. Shukadev Goswami.
It's Shukadev, is it? Okay. And at the end it's Sutta.
If I'm wrong, please. I seem to remember that.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so then later on, much later on, there's a slightly different list of 10. There are some variation, a couple of variations. But in the Bhagavatam, in the second canto, chapter 10, verses 1 and 2, let me just read out the list of the 10 subjects of Srimad Bhagavatam, which are the sort of characteristic 10 subjects of a Mahapurana. So first is Sarga, primary creation, that's by the Lord. Second is Visarga, secondary creation, the creation of Lord Brahma. Then Sthana, maintenance, Poshana, mercy, Uti, desires, then Manvantara. Manvantara is what is the 6 that looks like. Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, Manvantara. Mahapurana describes the reigns of different Manus. So we've already seen that, haven't we? Here and there in the Bhagavatam. Then Ishanu Kata, the pastimes of the Lord and his devotees. Yeah. Then Nirodha, annihilation, Mukti, liberation, and Ashraya, the substratum or ultimate shelter. And those verses say, to clarify the meaning of the 10th subject, the great souls describe the characteristics of the first 9 subjects by prayers and also by indirect and direct explanations. Okay, so devotees, seeing here Parikshit Maharaj is inquiring about about Manu and his descendants. This indicates, isn't it, that here we are dealing with the subject of Manvantara, but also because it's leading up to the appearance of Lord Krishna, and all sorts of pastimes are going to be described. This 9th canto is a combination of Manvantara and actually Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in his purport to this first verse. He says that this is, in the 9th canto, topics related to the followers of the Lord, Ishanu Kata, are told with the intention of propagating bhakti, vigyan, and vairagya. And this is demonstrated through splendid devotees, such as Ambarish. I don't know if you've got there the purports of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and Jiva Goswami. Are you using those? Nod or shake?
Sometimes, Maharaj.
Sometimes, okay. All right. So this 9th canto, it's a combination in terms of its place in Srimad Bhagavatam, which is Mahapurana. It's a combination of Manvantara and Ishanu Kata. Description of Manu and of a Manu and his descendants, and their pastimes, and leading up to the pastimes of the Lord. And of course, there's the pastimes of Lord Ram, there's Parasuram, and ultimately at the end, there's Lord Krishna. Yeah, so that's interesting. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, the way he does things is, Prabhupada gives his chapter analysis as a separate thing at the beginning of the chapter before he translates the first chapter. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he gives his chapter analysis generally, or often at least, as in the form of his purport to the first verse of the chapter. So here we are then. I'm not going to actually read every single verse, but that's basically how the scene is being set by Maharaj Parikshit. He's asking, can you please tell me about Vaivasvata Manu, the son of Vivasvan? And, I've heard certain things. I've heard that Ikshvaku was one of his sons. I mean, he's considered one of his sons, although, anyway, we'll get to that in a day or couple of days. Yeah, and he wants to hear about the dynasties and the characteristics of those kings descended from Vaivasvata Manu and directly leading up to Krishna, because the last one who's discussed, descendant of this Manu, the last one is Yadu. And there's mention of Vrishni also. And of course, Krishna appeared in the Yadu dynasty. Yeah. By his mercy, he gave the Yadu dynasty his mercy by appearing in that dynasty. So we go on. Let's go on to the second section. It's verse 7 to verse 22, where the subject matter is the birth of Ela and her transformation into Sudyumna. Yes, wow, what a story. It's amazing. You know, nowadays, I mean, maybe I shouldn't even mention it, but nowadays there's a phenomenon on, I don't think it's a large scale, but it definitely happens, of people wanting to change their sex, their gender. You know, I'm sure, particularly those of you who are from the Western world and just, you know, familiar with everything that's going on there, you would be well aware of that. That even in my youth, which I think, you know, looking at all of you, maybe with the exception of Ram Krishna Prabhu, I don't know, I think you're from a more recent era than my era. There's a singer from my era, she just uses one name, Cher, and her daughter, who, as I understand, they had or have an interest in Krishna consciousness, as I understood from many years ago, that there's some interest there in Krishna consciousness between her and the daughter, or it may be one of the two, something like that. But the daughter has now transformed into a male. Hare Krishna, Hare Bol, such is life in the material world. Sure, I tell you, Kali Yuga, sometimes it's just incredible. Well, not just sometimes, also. I think it's generally incredible. Sometimes something normal happens. So here we have, I mean, this is way back. This is way back in Satya Yuga, or something like that. Yeah, some sort of time, yeah, earlier in the creation. And something not unrelated is happening. It's, wow. And as we'll read through this chapter, and we'll see that different things happen, which, you know, they shouldn't really happen. They're not really very good things. And it reminds us that we're in the material world, even though it may be Satya Yuga, that's okay. But even though it's Satya Yuga, it's still the material world. So even to be in the material world in Satya Yuga, in some sort of heavenly situation like Vaivasvata Manu, you know, his living circumstances are super heavenly. But still, when you're in the material world, you know, you got to watch out, because stuff happens. And sometimes Sometimes even when you're a really important person in the material world, sometimes stuff happens in your, environment, and you can't avoid it. And it affects you. It has real implications in your life. So, okay. So let us launch into this story about the birth of Ila and a transformation into Sudyumna. Okay, so Shukadev Goswami begins his response to the inquiries of Maharaj Parikshit. And he says, it's interesting, Prabhupada translates in verse 7, now hear from me in great detail about the dynasty of Manu. And, as you go through particularly later on the verses, you'll see the detail. There's great detail, tremendous detail about who was the son of who and who was the brother of this one and all of that. Tremendous detail. And he's just sort of touching the surface of it, because as he says here in verse 7, although one could not say everything about it, even in hundreds of years. Yeah. So, okay. So the process of creation is touched on, a bit of sarga for us. So we got Manvantara. It's mainly Manvantara with Ishanukata, but there's a bit of sarga, the creation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and then a bit of Visarga. When we get to like verse 10, there's a bit of Visarga, that from the mind of Lord Brahma, Marichi takes birth. And then from Marichi, Kasyapa appears from the womb of the daughter of Daksha Maharaj. There's another interesting person. Anyway, we won't get into Daksha. You've already been through a lot of Daksha Katha, I'm sure. And then Aditi and Diti for that matter, but then from Kasyapa, by the womb of Aditi, Vivasvan takes birth, and then Shraddha Dev, who's also known as Vaivasvata, is born. So if you look at verses 11 and 12, just to get the chronology, so it's described there in verses 11 and 12 that Shraddha Dev, Vaivasvata, had 10 sons in the womb of his wife Shraddha, and these sons were Ikshvaku, Nriga, etc. And Nabhaga is there. Nabhaga is important, as we'll see as we go through the 9th canto. But then 13 says, at first he had no sons. So therefore he performed this yajna, which is mentioned here, is introduced in verse 13. So chronologically, we should understand that this yajna and then the appearance of Ila, it comes before the births of these 10 sons. Just a little chronology. It comes before the birth of the 10 sons. Because at first he was sonless. And then in order to get a son, he approached Vasishta, and Vasishta performed a yajna for Mitra and Varuna. Okay. So, as fate would have it, and like we said, in this material world, sometimes stuff happens. So some stuff happened. Some stuff happened. Oh, Krishna. Shraddha, the wife of Manu, of Vaivasvata, Shraddha, she was taking the whole thing very seriously, extremely seriously. So Shraddha had the desire, got the desire, or already had it, but she was desirous of having a daughter. So she approached not Vasishta, but he's called the Hota priest. They're different priests who perform different aspects of a Vedic, like a real traditional Shruti fire yajna. So, and she, of course, she knew that her husband, this extremely important person, the Manu, Vaivasvata, he wanted a son. But she approached not Vasishta, and not even the chief priest, who was like overseeing the different elements of the sacrificial processes. She approached the priest, the Hota. He's called the Hota, Hota, the one who is in charge of making the actual offerings into the fire, offering the different substances. She was taking it very seriously. Verse 14 says that she was observing a vow by drinking only milk. That's pretty serious, isn't it? It doesn't say for how long, but it must be for some period of time. It wasn't just on the day. She was, in order, because she knew this is important. That we really need or want a son, but still she approached that particular one of the priests, that can you do something in order that I get a daughter? So when the chief priest, he's called the Advaryo, when the Advaryo priest instructed the Hota that, okay, now make the offering, the Hota priest, as he made the offering, he chanted, verse 15 mentions that he chanted the word Vashat. Yeah, so because, it's a combination of things. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, the Hota priest was influenced by Shraddha, by the wife. And as he was doing the offering the oblations into the fire, he remembered quite strongly the desire of Shraddha. Plus Vashat, apparently it seems, it has some sort of connection with desiring a female child to come as the result of the yajna. So it's a combination, it appears, of using that term, which otherwise he would not have used, and his remembrance, his meditation on the request of Shraddha. So as a result, a daughter was born, Ela was born. And Manu, the verse number 16 says, Manu was not very satisfied. It's not like he was angry. In fact, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur makes the point that actually he was joyful. He was happy. But his joy, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, his joy was ordinary. He uses the term ordinary joy. And he thought, how can we change this? What can we do about this? Is there something that we can do? So he approaches Vasishta, and as you see in verse 17, he more or less complains. He more or less complains to Vasishta that how's this possible? Because we have to understand the level of qualification of Vasishta and the level of qualification of these priests. The level of qualification is extremely high. So therefore, Manu wants to know, how could this have happened? It would, if things were done properly, it would be impossible. It could not happen that we'll get a female child instead of a male child. It's a reversal. So now Srila Prabhupada, as you can see here for verse 17, Prabhupada gives a substantial purport. It's really a substantial purport. And it is sort of, you could say, it's kind of the nature that you'll see a number of purports by Srila Prabhupada in different places here and there in his writings, where Srila Prabhupada gives a purport about the performance of yajna, which is, at least say in principle, very similar to this purport. He discusses similar elements of the picture of yajna, of sacrifice. And I think it's the biggest purport in the whole chapter, actually. And by any standards, it's a substantial purport. And so, I don't want to go through the whole thing in detail because you're all big scholars and you know all these things extremely well. But Srila Prabhupada points out, particularly he points out how now the best type of yajna is the Sankirtan yajna, or not even the best type now. Prabhupada begins the purport by saying that in this age the performance of yajna has been forbidden because no one can properly chant the Vedic mantras. And if the mantras are chanted properly, then the desire for which the sacrifice is performed, it will be successful. It will the desired result will come. But nowadays, and in those yagyas, because in those traditional Shruti yagyas based on the Samhitas of the 4 Vedas, based on them, like particularly from the Brahmanas, the Aranyakas, then those mantras need to be chanted properly. And otherwise you don't get the result. During those yagyas, generally different demigods are addressed and requested for different things. And they would personally appear as the yajna was going on. They'd personally appear and interact with the people who are performing the yajna. But nowadays, people can't chant the mantras well enough, and their consciousness is not pure enough to really be able to arouse response from the different persons who are being addressed in the yajnas. And, Srila Prabhupada is said to have said, I don't know if I should even mention it, but Srila Prabhupada is said to have said, I've not come across the actual statement directly, but definitely devotees say that Prabhupada said that nowadays the demigods would not appear here. And they say that Prabhupada said the demigods would not even come to this earth planet even to urinate. They consider it so inauspicious, just so way out. So therefore, the only yajna which is worthwhile trying to do is Sankirtan yajna. I was told, those of you from India, you probably know more about this than me, but I was definitely told that in India, there are still like ashrams and Vedic schools where young people, generally young men, are trained in Sanskrit and the chanting of mantras. And I was told that in a few of them, for the final exam, you have to recite Bhagavad Gita off by heart in Sanskrit backwards. That's what I was told. How many of you sitting there know Bhagavad Gita off by heart? Anyway, if one of you does, congratulations. I don't. Yeah, I don't. But, they take it, they really try. They take it very seriously. But still they cannot come up to the standard where they can do these traditional Vedic yajnas and the result will come and the different demigods or different personalities who are being addressed in the yajna will actually appear and speak to them and interact and associate with them. Yeah. And if you do the yajnas incorrectly, then you can get the wrong result, or a different result, or a wrong result. And you've already done the 6th canto, So you know the story already of the sacrifice of Twashta when he wanted to get a son who could kill Indra. You remember that? You must. I'm sure you've been through that whole story. What a story! That is just that is an incredible story. That what was it? That he should have said Indra Shatraho, wasn't it? But he mispronounced the Shatraho, and he said Indra Shatro. Are you with me there? And Indra Shatraho, if I remember it correctly, Indra Shatraho means that the person who will come from this yajna will be the enemy of Indra, which is a nice way of saying that he'll be able to kill Indra. But when he mispronounced Indra Shatro, it means that Indra will be his enemy. And as a result, what was his name? Who came from the yajna? Huh? Vritrasura, my gosh. Even though he looked like he could kill Indra, and he almost was able to, but he couldn't. So, this is a problem with using Shruti mantras from the four Vedas, and doing performances from the four Vedas. One of the serious problems is if you mispronounce, if you make mistakes, then you will get different results. Yeah. And, an interesting little point, by the way, in Tattva Sandarbha, Srila Jiva Goswami, he discusses the chanting of Hare Krishna, which is sort of like a Smriti mantra, and he discusses just very briefly about the chanting of the Shruti mantras, and how these mantras are all persons, and how in Kali Yuga, the Shruti mantras, the personalities, they are frightened of being abused by being chanted by unqualified people in Kali Yuga. And therefore, because they're frightened, they don't appear in the Shruti mantras. In other words, someone chants some Shruti mantra, but there's nobody home. They're not actually really contacting the person who is generally like the personality of the mantra or the mantras. Anyway, here, so this is a very important point. It's really a hugely important point, which Srila Prabhupada emphasizes so much, that in Kali Yuga, that the yajna is the Sankirtan yajna. And other yajnas, just, don't waste your time. Don't waste your time. Of course, we do perform a few yajnas. Initiation, I think you're all initiated devotees, I imagine. So you've sat in one or two fire yajnas for marriages, But beyond those things, Prabhupada didn't really get into fire yajnas, and we only do them. I remember when one time when our processes of initiation were being discussed in the GBC body, and when the decision was made that yes, we should do fire yajnas at the time when initiations are being carried out, then the conclusion was we are doing these yajnas because Prabhupada did. That's all. We're just doing them because Prabhupada did yajnas when he gave initiation. But we're not doing them really in the context like this yajna was done. This was like a big time traditional Vedic fire yajna. So, okay. Can I just ask you a question? Of course, we started a few minutes late anyway, but we've been going plus or minus an hour. Should we take a break, or should I just carry on? Should we take a break, Prabhu?
Generally, the bodies have been taking like 5-10 minute break per class. No one is saying anything, so I'm not sure if they want a break or not, but I believe that that's been the standard so far.
Okay.
Okay, so at least a couple of people wanted it. So I think it's coming at the minute break.
Let's take a break.
Yeah.
Okay, devotees. So we'll take a break, and we'll see you in 10 minutes. Is that okay? 10 minutes. 10 minutes. Okay. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So, devotees, what do? We just wait for everyone to, everyone, okay, all right. So, Hare Krishna, devotees, we're back together again. Hare Krishna. All right, so where were we? Verse 17, I think. Was it? 17, yes. Okay. Yeah, all right. So, one thing, it's just an interesting little point we could note from this purport to verse 17, that Srila Prabhupada does sort of about two-thirds of the way down in the purport. Prabhupada talks about doing Sankirtan Yajna. If the result of such a yajna, as a result of such a yajna, there will be clouds in the sky. Yagyad bhavati parajanya. In these days of drought, people can gain relief from scarcity of rain and food by the simple method of the Hare Krishna Yajna. Indeed, this can relieve all of human society. Sure, interesting, isn't it? Srila Prabhupada is referring to, you could say, using Sankirtan in order to get rain. I wouldn't say he's exactly doing that. I wouldn't say Prabhupada is exactly advocating that people should chant Hare Krishna in order to get rain. But the thing is, the way I take Prabhupada's reference there to doing Sankirtan and rain will come, I take it more, it's not really in the sort of, karma kandiya sense, because Prabhupada was really not into karma kandiya at all. But I take it more that what Prabhupada is saying is that if people, the more the better, chant Hare Krishna, perform Sankirtan Yajna, and Prabhupada also mentions avoiding sinful activities. Yeah, if they stop their sinful activities, then all their problems will be solved. I take it that all their problems will be solved because Krishna will be merciful, Krishna will be kind, and Krishna will help them to get by as they practice Krishna consciousness. I can say for myself, I've been practicing for 48 years. 48. I moved into the temple in London on the 7th of January, 1973. And since then, Krishna has been looking after me. I can say, I've traveled the world more than I'm sure at least 90%, I'm sure it's more like 95%, it's probably more like 99%, I've traveled the world more than 90 whatever % of the population. Yeah, and I haven't worked. I retired when I was 21. I think it was 1972. I retired. I haven't worked since. But I am not suffering from shortage of food. In fact, there's more a problem of too much food. Yes. And I think the same applies to yourselves. Krishna looks after the devotees. Krishna looks after those who are trying to be devotees, who are trying to become devotees. Krishna really does. It's truly amazing how Krishna looks after his devotees. So this whole mention here, I think is it the last paragraph of the purport? Yeah. The last paragraph where it could be interpreted that Prabhupada is encouraging something like using the chanting of Hare Krishna for material gain. I don't take it like that. I don't think we should take it like that. I think rather we should try and see it from the point of view of Krishna looking after his devotees. This is one point in specifically, very specifically addressed in Tattva Sandarbha. I hope you don't mind me referring to Tattva Sandarbha from time to time, but it's a very fascinating book. In Tattva Sandarbha, Srila Jiva Goswami makes the point that we should understand that the subject matter of Srimad Bhagavatam is Krishna and devotional service to Krishna. That's what we should understand. But then what happens is from time to time we come across verses which seem to, maybe, for example, present the impersonal Brahman, or present the super soul, or, there are verses I was just reading, I think yesterday. What was it? It was something to do with, it was from the 4th canto. And it was something to do with Maharaj Prithu, that's right. That at the end of the narration about Maharaj Prithu, and in other places the same thing happens, it says that there are different benedictions offered. If you read the story about Maharaj Prithu, you're going to become rich. You're going to become king of the world, isn't it? Anyway, have a look there, you'll see. I mean, I'm sure you're aware, you're scholars of Srimad Bhagavatam. And of course, these things are true, but mainly the point is that by rendering service to the Lord, in this case by doing Sankirtan, you get mercy. You get special mercy from the Lord. Just so much greater mercy than anybody gets, even if they get loads of money. But it's all a bit of a joke compared to the mercy you get by trying to be or trying to become a devotee. So, okay, anyway, here we go. Let's carry on. So the next point that we could just glance at for a moment, in verse 18. In verse 18, there's the point is made that, all these people have been doing this yajna. They are just so totally qualified. They have such a level of qualification. It's, frankly, by our standards, it's practically inconceivable. And therefore, whatever they say will come true. So how is it possible if we did this yajna, and if you did everything right for getting a son, for me getting a son, but I got a daughter, what happened? What happened? And Srila Prabhupada makes the point here in the purport that, he says, by performing austerities and penances, by controlling the senses and mind, achieving full knowledge of the absolute truth. Well, of course, that's there. But all these things are just natural parts of the process of Krishna consciousness. That's really the point. The point is not so much, let's do some special austerities, let's do some special penances, let's do some special sense control, mind control, and all this sort of stuff. And then whatever we say will come true. And if we give any blessings, they'll come true, like what the demigods are capable of doing, that it's all going to happen just on the basis of austerity, penance, sense and mind control. To whatever degree it's going to happen by the mercy of the Lord if we engage in devotional service nicely, which naturally involves austerity, penance, sense and mind control, and all that sort of thing. And, you probably, I'm sure you've read in the second canto towards the end, where Lord Brahma is explaining his position to Narada Muni, and how it is that he's such a personality. There Lord Brahma makes the point to Narada Muni that because of the mercy of the Lord through my rendering of devotional service to the Lord, then Lord Brahma says that so now whatever I say comes true. Whatever I say comes true. Because the Lord is so kind to him because of his devotional service, because of what a devotee he is. The Lord is so kind to him that all he has to do is say something, and the Lord will protect his words, and the Lord will make it come true. Yeah. So therefore we as devotees, or aspiring devotees, or however you might put it, we should be careful what we say. We should be careful what we desire, because it may come true. It may not come true also, because we are not on the level of Lord Brahma, and we are not on the level of these devotees here, these big priests and so on. We're not on that level, but we're on some level. We are somewhere in Krishna consciousness. We are somewhere. We are not nowhere. By the mercy of Srila Prabhupada, and through our association with the devotees, etc., we are somewhere in Krishna consciousness, whether we like it or not, or whether anyone likes it or not. So we should be careful, one, what we desire, and two, what we say. Because sometimes these things will come true. And particularly if you desire the wrong things, you can get into terrible trouble if some of those things you desire come true. And sometimes Krishna, because he may want to teach you a lesson, if you're desiring something wrong, he may make it come true, just to kind of embarrass you or shake you up and make you more convinced that you have to maintain the standards properly. So anyway, yeah, it's a fact. What Srila Prabhupada says here is very much a fact, that if we really render service nicely, which includes austerity, penance, controlling senses and mind, and developing knowledge, then gradually more and more of what we say, and even our blessings, will actually come true. And you'll get people coming to you, particularly if you have to take the service of being a spiritual master, which, is very likely to come to some of you sooner or later. Spiritual masters are meant to give blessings, not just meant to, they have to. They're duty bound to give blessings to the sincere disciples at least. And you'll have the experience that some devotees will come to you and thank you for your blessings because, whatever was involved happened. It came true. So it's a very important point. We have to be careful, more and more careful as time goes on, what we desire, what we think, and what we say, because things will start coming true. Okay, so let's carry on. We're going to finish this chapter today. There's a number more verses. How many more? But there's not so much. Oh, well, anyway, okay. Let's do our best to finish. All right, so Vasishta, he understood that one of the priests had done something wrong. And so, okay, so now he wants to correct it. So here we are, 19, 20, 21, 22. 22, Vasishta offers prayers to the Lord. And on the basis of his prayers, the girl, Ila, becomes a boy, Sudyumna. But not just some boy, as verse 22 says, a very fine male. He was like a very beautiful young boy. Very beautiful young boy. Although he was, materially speaking, male. Yeah. So, all right, all is well, if you want to put it that way. Things have been changed to the way that at least Vaivasvata Manu wanted them. And now we see, we come to section 3 from verse 23 to 32. Sudyumna transforms back into a female, and just a little bit of the background to the place where it happened, the Sukumara forest. So yeah, the verses go on, and there's very little in the way of purports. The verses go on for a while, that Sudyumna, now he's an adult. He's not a child. He is an adult. So he has been a male now for, some fair number of years. So he goes with some ministers and associates, and he's wearing armor, he's got bows and arrows, and he's hunting in the forest. He is not a child, he is an adult now. He's been male for, however many years, but it's quite some number. And he and his associates, they enter into this forest at the bottom of Mount Meru, Sukumara, where it's a place of Lord Shiva, where Lord Shiva enjoys conjugal pastimes with Uma, with Parvati, his wife. And so they enter the forest, and Sudyumna, who here again, I'm looking at 26, he's described as being expert in subduing enemies. So he's really an adult. He is a fully mature adult. And they're in the Sukumara forest. Suddenly he's transformed into a female, and his horse becomes a female horse, a mare, and all his other ministers and associates and whoever, they all also take female forms. Interesting. And then, this little bit of background is given about the forest. How are these things happening in this particular place? Is that that this is a place of Lord Shiva and his wife, Uma or Parvati, and where they come for conjugal pastimes. In other words, sex life, actually. Yeah. It's apparently a suitable place for that. So they were there. If we look at, 30. Yeah, verse 30. Well, actually, verse 29. Let's look at verse 29. That some devotees, great saintly people, who are very strictly following the standards, and who are so elevated, their bodies were so effulgent that they lit up the darkness in the forest. They came to have darshan of Lord Shiva, and Parvati, Ambika, was naked, sitting on Lord Shiva's lap. And suddenly these saintly people just appear on the scene, and she felt extremely embarrassed and tried to cover herself. And those saintly people, when they saw this, they thought, wow, what a serious mistake. So they just turned around and just left. So therefore, verse 32, Lord Shiva offers a blessing to Parvati that if any male enters here, they'll immediately become a female. And this is what's happened here. So this brings us to section 4, verses 33 to 42. It's the last part of the purport. Sudyumna partially regains his maleness. So, obviously, even though that arrangement was there, it's like a curse, really. But it seems like it was not well known. So now we're here, verse 33, Sudyumna, he is now in a female body, is walking with his associates in the forest. One interesting little technical point I could note is that here now, from now on, the next few verses, wherever there is reference to the associates, they are addressed in grammatical masculine form. You understand? Using because in terms of gender in Sanskrit, there's masculine, feminine, and neuter. And they're different grammatical forms, endings for the words in the different genders. So the associates are addressed in the masculine grammatical forms. That's just by the way, if you're familiar with Sanskrit grammar at all. Okay, so now Prabhupada gives an interesting purport here to verse 33, that this verse and this whole pastime substantiates change of body. Prabhupada quotes very famous verse, Bhagavad Gita 2:22. Vasamsi janani yata vahaya navani granati naroparani tata sharirani vahaya janani anyani samyati navani dehi. As a person puts on new garments, giving up old ones, the soul accepts new material bodies, giving up the old and useless ones. So Prabhupada goes on to make the point that this proves what Sejumna and company are going through. It proves the body's just a dress. Yeah. They're all male. It's interesting. Prabhupada says Sejumna and his associates were all male, which means that their souls were covered by male dress, but now they became female, which means that their dress was changed. The soul remains the same. Yeah. Sometimes when we're talking about reincarnation and how, we're not these bodies. For example, I have a male body, and some of you have male bodies, some of you have female bodies. We're different ages, some are younger, some are older. This is all in terms of the body. So, and in each lifetime, we have had different bodies. Who knows what our bodies were in our previous lifetime? Who knows what our bodies were in the lifetime before the previous body? But it's very likely they were quite different from the bodies we have now. In in the fourth canto, right? The story of Puranjan. In the story of Puranjan, Srila Prabhupada makes the point that because in each lifetime, a person is generally more attached to the opposite sex than anything else. It's such a major preoccupation for the conditioned souls, the opposite sex. So Srila Prabhupada, when Puranjan becomes Puranjani, I imagine you can remember that from the fourth canto. When Puranjan becomes Puranjani, because as Puranjan, he was just like hopelessly attached to his wife. So Srila Prabhupada makes the point that, this is common, this is not unusual at all, that people are more attached to their husband or wife than they are to anything else. So therefore, Prabhupada explains that generally in the next life, you get a body in terms of the opposite sex. So if you have a male body, as a number of us do here right now, in those terms, if we were just ordinary people in ordinary material life, we would expect that in our next lives we would get female bodies and vice versa. And we would expect that our previous body, it's very likely, if we have male bodies now, it's very likely that in our previous body we had previous life we had female bodies, and then before that it was a male body. And Prabhupada makes this point. There's this tendency to go male, then female, then male, then female, then like that. At least it's not unusual for this to happen. So then sometimes when people hear these things, just, people are not devotees, they're just being introduced to these ideas. Sometimes people say, well, or they wonder, who is the real me? Is it the male of this lifetime, or, arguably the female of the previous lifetime, or the male of the lifetime before that? Whatever the bodily situations were. But of course, none of them is the real you. None of them. They're all just dresses. And we change our dresses just on a daily basis or twice a day, whatever it may be. We change our dress. So Srila Prabhupada is utilizing this story. It's something we can bear in mind for our own preaching. There's the story, of course, of Bharat Maharaj becoming a deer due to preoccupation with the baby deer. There's also the story of Sudyumna and his associates, male, becoming, or not becoming female, but getting female bodies. Is something we can use in our preaching. Yes. So that was a little background there. So now we go back to the actual story of Sudyumna there in the forest with his associates. So well, Sudyumna is now a female. Buddha, who is also, we're going to come across Buddha later on in this 9th canto. Buddha is the son of the moon, and he wanted to enjoy Sudyumna in the female form, and he does, and as a result, Pururava is born. And Pururava is another one who's going to feature quite prominently, actually, in the 9th canto further on. So now we read in 36, Sudyumna remembers Vasishta, who is his familial spiritual master. It's interesting, Prabhupada puts it that way. Vasishta is the family guru. As we'll see as the narrations go on, Vasishta, he gets a bit materially affected. We'll see that as in the next chapter, actually. He becomes materially affected in a different situation. So he goes back, and Vasishta is very upset. his work of making him into a male has not been really effective. So Vasishta worships Lord Shiva, and Lord Shiva gives a benediction, but also wants to protect his word to Parvati. So Lord Shiva says in verses 38 and 39, your disciple Sadyumna may remain a male for 1 month and a female for the next. In this way he may rule the world as he likes. I don't know what he means by as he likes, but anyway, it's not really as he likes, actually, as it works out. So, yeah. So Prabhupada gives a purport here to 38 and 39 and explains, well, Vasishta is the family priest, really. He's more like a family priest. But in those days, being a family priest and being an actual spiritual master was kind of the same thing, Prabhupada says. Brahmins, at least traditionally, generally act as spiritual masters of 2 dynasties. One is the spiritual succession, the other is the family line. So in those days, as Prabhupada says, there's no difference because everyone was Krishna conscious in those days. Yeah. And Prabhupada makes the point the same system is still there in India, especially in regard to marriage. You must marry someone from your own Gotra. Like Prabhupada is from the Gautam Gotra. That was Srila Prabhupada's Gotra. I'm from the Western world. I don't really have a Gotra. Nowadays, it doesn't make that much difference, if any. So anyway, as verse 40 says, Sadyumna was alternating male, female, but the verse says, verse 40, although the citizens were not very satisfied with this. I don't know if as a female, Sadyumna was like a Kshatriya woman. Like, who is it? The Maharani of, who's that famous Maharani who fought against the Muslims? Anyway. Jhansi. Right, she was a tough lady. She was a super tough lady. I don't know if Sadyumna was like that, or if, when he took a female form, he became like, a real gentle woman. They don't talk about that. Anyway, whatever. So, yeah. So Sadyumna had 3 very pious sons. They became kings. And Pururava also, the verse 42 mentions that when he was old, he handed the kingdom over to Pururava. And we'll see. I think there's a whole chapter about Pururava as we go on through the 9th canto. And the last point that Prabhupada makes in the purport of the final verse, Sadyumna, then he took Vanaprastha, really. He went into the forest. And Prabhupada quotes the classic verse, Panchashad urdvam vanam vrajet. When you reach 50, you must go to the forest or take sannyas. I mean, You know, we've got many householders now who have reached the age of 50. A few have taken sannyas, not so many. But, and even Prabhupada didn't take sannyas until he was 50 something, 56 was it, or whatever. But it's for those of you who are householder men, it's something to bear in mind that it is a tradition, and it's a tradition which Srila Prabhupada talked about on quite a number of occasions, actually. Quite a number of occasions. Giving up family life when you reach 50, or, you know, at least if we look at his own example, sometime not too long after reaching 50. So devotees, Hare Krishna. Thank you for listening very patiently. I hope it wasn't, you know, too boring for you or anything, whatever like that. Anyway, four more days to go. The main thing here, you know, the main part will be when we reach the 4th chapter, particularly the story of Maharaj Ambarish. That's just really, I mean, I assume you're already familiar with these things, but that 4th chapter, particularly the story of Maharaj Ambarish and Devasamuni, that is just something really special. Anyway, we'll see you tomorrow. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Thank you very much, Maharaj.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Oh,
Thank
Hare
you so much,
Krishna.
Maharaj.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Dhanyavad.
Bhakti Chaitanya Swami Maharaj ki
Oh.
jai.
आप लोग सब की जय. Okay.